Thank you, Mike. I would now like to introduce John Allen, Pablo Kay, and Elise Harris. John Allen is the editor of Crux, specializing in coverage of the Vatican and the Catholic Church. He has written 11 books on the Vatican and Catholic affairs, and also is a popular speaker on Catholicism, both in the United States and internationally. He is a contributing writer for Angelus News, the Archdiocese of Los Angeles' source for Catholic news, analysis, and commentary from Los Angeles and across the globe. Pablo Kay is the editor of Angelus News for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Prior to joining the Archdiocese, Pablo was an assignment editor for NBC7 in San Diego. Elise Harris is the correspondent for Crux from Rome. Thank you.
Great. Well, I thank you, CCMA, for having us. Thank you. It's great to be here. As she said, I'm the editor of Angelus News. We're the weekly news magazine and multimedia news platform for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. And since about a year ago, Crux, of which John Allen is the editor, writes for us an exclusive piece every week, and we have a great dynamic news partnership with them. So we wanted to give the opportunity for to take advantage that we have these two prestigious Vaticanistas here with us, and to kind of show off that we're kind of a big deal. So we had a few questions submitted from some of you before, and we'd like to get a few of those in. This is also being broadcast live on Facebook Live through Crux and Angelus. So we might have some questions floating in from the cyberspace as well. So to start off, one question that one of you submitted was about the news a couple days ago of a book coming out by Jerry O'Connell, another prestigious Vaticanista with America magazine, in which he described or claims to know or have been told what happened during the conclave that elected Pope Francis in 2013. Among the juicy tidbits was that Cardinal O'Malley, an American, received 10 votes, which put him fourth on the list of in the first round of voting. I wanted to ask John, what do you make of this report? Obviously, we'll have to read the whole book to see what else he says, but does that kind of line up with your reporting or what you've heard?
Thanks, Pablo. First of all, because Pablo's boss, David Scott, is in the room, I just want to be on record as saying, yes, Angelus is a big deal. You should all be reading it, because David will beat me to death later if I don't start with that. I will answer your question, Pablo. Also wanted to have a chance, though, since this will be the only time for me to speak to campus ministers here, just to say a quick word about how important what you do is. Elise and I spend a lot of time covering stories of scandal and crisis and controversy and heartbreak in the church, and that's important work, and it has to be done. But we're also both well aware that the faith either comes alive in the trenches, one-to-one at the retail level, or it doesn't happen at all. At best, we can tell those stories. You are living those stories. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for what you do, and keep it up. Now, to come to your question, listen, first of all, Jerry O'Connell, who has been a friend of mine for longer than either one of us would care to admit, Jerry is one of the best reporters on the Vatican beat going. He is serious, he is well-sourced, he is well-informed. So I have absolutely no doubt that the information in his book is trustworthy. More than that, it lines up with what we already knew. I mean, you know, he's giving us vote totals. But we already knew in March 2013, when this conclave took place, that Cardinal Angelo Scola of Milan was the preferred candidate of those who wanted continuity with John Paul II and Benedict XVI. We knew that Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio of Argentina was the preferred runner of those who wanted to try something different. And we knew that Cardinal Sean O'Malley of Boston had gotten a serious look. I mean, I quoted O'Malley after that conclave. And I thought the best line from that interview was when he said to me that if that had gone on much longer, I would have been in real trouble, meaning he might have been elected. right? And it is worth saying that this makes Cardinal Sean O'Malley by far the most plausible American candidate ever to be Pope. And, you know, none of this strikes me as particularly surprising. I think, you know, it was clear that after the almost 35 years of the John Paul and Benedict period in the life of the Church, there was a majority of the College of Cardinals that felt it was time for a new impetus. I think they wanted that to come from the developing world. I think Latin America was a logical place, and in many ways, Bergoglio of Argentina was the logical Latin American. I think Sean O'Malley's appeal is not at all surprising. By the way, footnote, did you all know that in the run-up to the conclave of March 2013, the Italian newspaper Corriere della Sera did an online poll among Italian Catholics asking them who they wanted to be Pope, and Sean O'Malley got 67%. He was the runaway front place finisher. And if you want to know why, because it seems odd, right? Like an American would be the favorite of the Italians. I've got 2 words for you, ladies and gentlemen. These 2 words say it all: Padre Pio. When Italians look at Sean O'Malley, okay, this bearded, brown habit-wearing Capuchin with his sandals who just exudes compassion for the ordinary person, and especially for those who have suffered, that's who they see. Padre Pio. And Padre Pio, look, in Italy, here's what you need to know. The Trinity in Italy is not God the Father, God the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Trinity in Italy is God, the Madonna, and Padre Pio. Okay? Every bar, every taxi cab, every Roman restaurant has the Santino, right? The holy card of Padre Pio. He is by far the most popular, beloved saint of the 20th century. And I think that is, to a large extent, the secret of Sean O'Malley's appeal, is that he speaks that same compassion for the ordinary person who's going through life's travails as Padre Pio. And I think the cardinals, at a different level, you know, would see the same qualities in him.
My conclusion is very different. I would think that if the Italians are saying this, America's already great, John. The next question for Elise. Both of you and the whole Crux team actually were just doing a saturation coverage of the Abuse Summit in Rome a month or so ago. I was just downstairs with Archbishop Gomez, and they were asking him about the synod and what's going on with the church now, and he kind of made a joke that, you know, a synod there in October, the one on the youth, was a whole month, and maybe it felt like it was too long. Whereas this Abuse Summit was 3 days. I wanted to ask Elise, do you think they were able to do anything productive in 3-4 days, being all together, all those bishops?
Look, I mean, if you're looking for sweeping changes in law and firm resolutions coming out of the thing, no, that's not, you know, if that's your gauge of success, I would say that's not something that was accomplished in this, and I don't think it was intended to accomplish that. But if, in terms of getting everybody on the same page about it, I mean, I think there's some questions still there, you know, but I think even just having a discussion like this, you know, for the first time at a global level, I think is a step. It's a step in the right direction, I think, for many people. Obviously, there's a lot of people who want more. We want to see action. We want to see concrete steps being taken. You know, but for me, covering this crisis, you know, for years, I mean, I was not around to cover this in 2002, you know, when the scandals broke out in the United States. But, you know, I've seen my fair share of it, and I have covered my fair share of it. And, you know, there's one thing, if there's one thing, you know, I can say there's certainly not a unified understanding of how serious this is, or the extent to which this happens. You know, there's certainly denial in some quarters of the church. And so, in terms of did anything meaningful come out of the summit, or did they accomplish something, I think holding the summit was something that was accomplished, and I think maybe getting everybody from the global stage at least admitting that this is a problem they need to pay attention to is something positive that came out of it. You know, I think there's much more to be done, and, you know, we'll see what's going to happen on that in the coming months and coming years.
Well, I wanted to open up the floor if anyone has a live question they'd like to ask either John or Elise. You can stand up and yell.
The article that Steinfeld wrote about the
Okay, so if you're not familiar with the premise of the question, an American Catholic journalist by the name of Peter Steinfels wrote a lengthy analysis of the Pennsylvania grand jury report, which of course concluded that more than 300 priests had been responsible for the sexual abuse of more than 1,000 minors over about a 50-year, 60-year arc of time. And Peter's analysis was that the report, while accurate in terms of the revelations that it contained, propagated a false narrative of no progress in the fight against child sexual abuse. In actuality, this is the heart of Peter's argument, the vast majority of those cases date from before the adoption of the Bishop's Charter in Dallas in 2002, and that since 2002, the pattern would seem to suggest that when abuse cases have arisen, they have been handled appropriately, that is, according to the terms of that charter. So that rather than being a sweeping indictment to court of the way that the church has responded, or suggesting that the crisis today is at exactly the same place it was 10 years ago, 18 years ago when Boston erupted, in fact, it is a story of lights and shadows, of good and bad. And I think in the main that is absolutely correct. That would track with my experience having covered this thing, because I was around in 2002, 2003. I was in Rome when the scandals exploded here, so I covered the Vatican end of it. And I can say that we are in a very different place today. I mean, basically, let me give you the good news and the bad news, okay? And this is at a wild level of generalization, but I will give it to you anyway. The good news is, well, let's take a step back. The clerical sexual abuse scandal is a scandal involving both the crime and the cover-up of child sexual abuse. What we have done over the last 17 years or so is get a good handle on the crime. We now have extremely strong state-of-the-art protocols in place in the Catholic Church, not globally, as Elise was saying, because there are many parts of the Catholic world where this has not arrived. But certainly in the United States, most parts of Western Europe, Oceania in most cases, you have extremely strong policies. You walk into the vestibule of any Catholic parish anywhere in those parts of the world, you're going to see a sign with an 800 number saying that if you suspect the sexual abuse of a child, call this number. When a report like that is made, that person is going to be removed from ministry, a serious investigation will be launched. If the accusation is substantiated, that person is going to be removed. If they are a priest, the odds are they are going to be expelled from the clerical state or defrocked, right? And what the McCarrick case proves to us is that now applies to everyone, okay? Even a cardinal, former cardinal of the Catholic Church can be defrocked if he is found to have been guilty of the sexual abuse of a minor. What we do not yet have, and this is the bad news, is equivalent accountability for the cover-up of child sexual abuse. To date, there is not a single bishop, religious superior, or other official of the church who has ever been subject to ecclesiastical sanction, not for the crime of child sexual abuse, but for the cover-up. I mean, just today, we saw the current Cardinal Archbishop of Santiago in Chile, who has been subpoenaed by civil prosecutors for his role in covering up child sexual abuse, and who's currently being sued over covering up a rape that allegedly took place in the bedroom of the residents at the cathedral. His resignation was accepted, but the Vatican didn't even tell us why. Okay, there was no mention of concerns about his role in the concealment of acts of sexual abuse, and that is a consistent pattern, okay? So, to come to your question, I think Steinfels got it exactly right in terms of the fact that the Catholic Church, particularly in the United States, deserves credit for a constructive and effective response to the crime. Okay? What we are still struggling with, both nationally and globally, is the cover-up, and that is the unfinished business.
Next question from the floor.
Minister, but it's only because I can't find a job posting for Crux yet.
Believe me, there's more money in campus ministry.
What can we expect from Pope Francis' letter or exhortation? I don't think we know exactly on Monday, to be released on Monday, right?
Yeah, well, in a second, I'm going to punt this question to Elise because she was one of our lead reporters on the Synod. First of all, do not expect thunderclaps along the lines of the last post-synodal exhortation that Francis released, which, of course, was Amoris Laetitia, drawing a conclusion the two synods on the family, and it contained that earthquake about communion for divorced and civilly remarried Catholics. I don't think there's going to be anything along those lines. I mean, in part because there was nothing quite that earth-shattering in the docket at the Synod for Youth to begin with. In the main, my own expectation is that the effort will be to make it a positive document, emphasizing the positive role that youth can play in the life of the church. There was a lot of concern at that Synod that often when the church talks about anything these days, including youth, we tend to lead with shadows rather than light. It's so easy to become consumed in what's going wrong that we never get around to what's going right. And there were a number of bishops at that Synod, for instance, who were worried that in talking so much about, youth alienation from the church and the appeal of secularist lifestyles that are contrary to faith and all this other stuff, all of which is real, right? That there wasn't enough emphasis on the fact that there are a surprising number of young people out there who, by their own lights, are actually trying to live the faith and do something positive with their lives. And, maybe rather than constantly wringing our hands, a more constructive use of our time and energy would be to try to support them, right?
I mean, everything that John said, I absolutely 100% back up. The only thing that I could add there in terms of maybe some other concrete things to expect from this document is sure a positive approach to youth, but also, during the Synod in the final document, suggestions had been made, for concrete steps to be taken, like maybe forming more institutes, academic institutes, where people can collaborate and come together to talk about what role youth can play and to study, the role of youth and what opportunities they might have to take leadership positions. So I would expect maybe the Pope might address some of those things, and the emphasis on local churches and kind of taking things into your own hands. When I was covering this Synod, one of the things that the youth themselves had told me was, that they had wanted to see some more follow-up. If there's a document, they would hope there would be more follow-up or opportunities or ideas for follow-up to come out of it, because that was one of the criticisms they had of Amoris Laetitia, is aside from the debate that was happening on, certain chapters and footnotes in that, they said there was a lot of nice things in it, about families and couples and good advice that weren't actually implemented at the parish level or weren't implemented in the day-to-day life. And so one of the things they were asking for, and that, I guess I could say I would hope, and that they would be hoping from the document, is that some of those things in terms of follow-up to the youth and their activities might be addressed as well.
One question that just came in from the cyberwebs. Who's going to be the next pope, John?
Well, I'm voting Pablo K., of course. Hot tip. Look, I'll answer your question because I actually have a hot new candidate. But let me preface this by saying, first of all, there is absolutely no health scare around Pope Francis right now. I mean, the guy is 81, of course, but by all appearances, he is good to go for a while. And despite his chatter at the beginning about his papacy potentially being a short one, most of us who cover him think there's no sign that the end is near. Fair? Yeah. And further, I don't personally believe that Pope Francis is going to resign. I know that has been talked about, and of course it is on the books as a possibility, but quite honestly, I think he's having too much fun being Pope. I think he just finds this to be a blast and is unlikely to step away anytime soon. Therefore, who the likely next popes are will depend upon when this happens. But let's assume the unthinkable happened and we had to have a conclave tomorrow, right? Well, if you're going to look at the current crop of members of the College of Cardinals, and let's assume that the dynamic of the conclave is as it always is, because every conclave is a referendum on continuity with the papacy that just ended. You either want to keep this thing going and therefore elect somebody you think is likely to do that, or you want to move in some new direction and therefore you vote for change, right? I think right now probably neither one of those camps in this College of Cardinals has an absolute 2/3 majority, which is what you need to elect a pope. So inevitably they would be looking for a compromise candidate. If conventional logic were to apply, and I had to bet $5 on the outcome, I would probably look at somebody like Cardinal Christoph Schönborn, a Vienna Dominican cardinal, who is very much seen as a Pope Francis guy in line with Pope Francis's agenda, but also has strong cachet with the more conservative elements in the college. He was the sort of Dauphin of Cardinal Ratzinger back in the day, general editor of the New Catechism of the Catholic Church, speaks 7 languages comfortably, and probably, like if you were going to pick a quiz bowl team in the College of Cardinals, this is the guy you would want, okay? However, hot new tip, because, you know, it's not going to happen today, okay? So here's a guy to keep your eye on. I am not predicting necessarily that this guy, in fact, let me put it this way. If this guy becomes the Pope, remember you heard it here first. If he doesn't, forget I ever said this. But there is a new archbishop in Abuja, Nigeria, which is the capital of Nigeria. The guy there currently is Cardinal John Onaiyekan, but he just got a coadjutor, which means this guy will eventually become archbishop and undoubtedly someday a cardinal. It's Archbishop Ignatius Kaigama. Archbishop Kaigama is formerly of Jos in Nigeria's Middle Belt, which has been the center of a lot of Christian-Muslim tension for a long time now. So he's been on the front lines of those sorts of issues for a great deal of time. He's from Halingo originally up north, which is the Muslim-dominated region of Nigeria, so he knows this relationship in his bones. He is an extraordinarily smart, sophisticated guy. He's got a wicked sense of humor. I mean, I went to his diocesan synod in Jos a couple of years ago, and I swear to God, it was like being on the set of the Jimmy Fallon show. You know, the guy's just hilarious. And in addition, if you look at him just physically, he's this short little roly-poly, frumpy-looking guy. It's like, you know, John the 23rd's black nephew, okay? And so, you know, I think for a lot of reasons he could have some real appeal. And it may be, you know, I mean, he would, on the cultural issues, he would definitely be somebody that the JP2 Ratzinger current would feel a lot of sympathy for. But when it comes to interfaith dialogue, social justice, a lot of the cornerstone Pope Francis issues, he's also right there. So somebody to have in your radar screens.
Very good. Well, looks like we're out of time, and we hope this session has helped your food go down a little easier. I wanted to make a special announcement, though. I'm really grateful that we've been given the opportunity to do this, that John and Elise were able to come, and that you guys put up with us for 15 minutes. So, what Angelus is doing is we'd like to give each of your campus ministries 5 free, how do you say this? 5 free subscriptions for the next 6 months to your campus ministry office. So, I'll be here at the end. Give me your business card or email me your email, your mailing address, and for whoever would like, you'll get Angelus for 6 months free, your campus ministry. Thank you very much.